The burst came in at 3:47, tagged Priority 3. Priority 3 means historical. It means unresolved. It means somebody somewhere filed a distress call that was never canceled, never followed up, never closed out, and it has now surfaced at a monitoring station that inherited the frequency from an authority that no longer exists. I had been on corridor watch for 6 weeks aboard the Ashford Loop, a patrol corvette running the Core 9 transit line. Standard rotation. Nothing on the scope for 11 days but cargo haulers and automated survey buoys. We were 13 hours from the end of rotation when the burst landed on band Orvith 06. The system flagged it automatically. No cancellation on file. No resolution logged. Standing orders on unresolved distress are not complicated. Investigate, regardless of age. The age is what stopped me. 214 years. The burst had been filed by Colony Saveth Reach, a Velhari settlement on the inner rim of the Korath corridor. Evacuation class seismic event. Priority, immediate. Addressee, the Velhari Compact Emergency Coordination Bureau, Sector Orvith, Relay Code Keth 04. The Coordination Bureau was dissolved 180 years ago. I pulled the relay metadata while Pren, my executive officer, brought up the corridor charts. The burst had been sitting in a damaged sector relay's retransmission buffer for the entire duration. Node Keth 14 on the old Kethorvith data spine, flagged for maintenance 3 times across 2 centuries and never serviced. The buffer had been occupied by higher priority traffic, fleet dispatches, cargo manifests, navigational updates, administrative circulars, all filed after the evacuation burst but ranked above it in the transmission queue. When the last high-priority packet finally cleared, the relay did what relays are designed to do. It transmitted the next item in the buffer. The next item was a 214-year-old plea for help. The Bureau's frequency, Orvith 06, had been inherited by Earth's Deep Grid Monitoring Array under Article 7 of the Joint Emergency Survey Accord. Nobody on the Velhari side had notified us when the Bureau dissolved. Nobody on our side had removed the frequency from the active monitoring list. The Accord was still technically in force. So when the burst cleared the buffer, it arrived at my station, on my watch, 4 hours off the transit line. I diverted. Pren reviewed the metadata and asked if there was any indication the emergency was still active. I told her there was no indication it wasn't. She nodded. That was the procedure. An open distress call is an open distress call. 4 hours is a long diversion for a Priority 3. Pren pulled the colonial records during transit. Saveth Reach, founded, settled, evacuated, reclassified. A full life cycle compressed into 60 hours and a single paragraph in the Velhari Colonial Registry. No follow-up visits logged. No geological survey conducted. No one went back. We came in over Saveth Reach at mid-morning local time. The colony sat on a broad plateau above a shallow river valley, laid out in the clean grid pattern the Velhari use for frontier settlements. Prefabricated structures in ordered rows, bleached pale by 2 centuries of unfiltered daylight. Vegetation had cracked the landing apron and pushed through the drainage channels. The atmospheric processors stood along the western edge in a silent row, dark for 170 years. The Central Administration Complex, 4 stories, Velhari composite, a material that outlasts most of the governments that commission it, was intact. 1 life sign on the scanner. I brought the Corvette down on what remained of the primary pad. Cracks in the surface, weeds through every seam, but the foundation held our weight. 4 crew came with me. Sidearms, standard survey kit. We walked 500 meters through empty streets where the drainage gutters had silted in and small, dry-season grasses had rooted in the joints between paving slabs. The wind moved through open doorways. Something metal shifted inside a supply depot. A panel, a hinge, the kind of sound an empty building makes when it has forgotten what it was built for. No other noise. The colony had been dead longer than most governments last. Third floor of the admin complex. Records office. Portable scanning equipment arranged on the old desks, neatly stacked data wafers, a compact field station running on a solar cell clamped to the window frame. His name was Varan Osthen. Colonial Survey Division, Reclassification Bureau. A Velhari civil servant, dispatched alone to Savith reached 3 weeks prior to conduct a habitability assessment. His government was considering reopening the site. He looked at us the way a man looks at a door, opening in a room that has no door. "There is no emergency here," he said. His Terran standard was accented but careful. "I filed survey permissions with the compact 9 weeks ago. This site is under assessment." I showed him the burst on my portable display. Full header, timestamp, content, addressee, relay path, buffer position, queue clearance time. He read it, read it again. His hand moved to the edge of the table and stayed there. "This was filed by the colonial governor," he said. "Governor Osvalen, 214 years ago." "Yes." "The Coordination Bureau has not existed for 180 years. "No." He looked at the addressee field one more time, as though the characters might rearrange themselves into something that made more sense. "The frequency. Inherited by our monitoring array under the original Accord. Article 7. The Accord was never formally withdrawn on either side." He sat down, not suddenly, slowly, the way a man sits when the arithmetic has finished and the answer is a number he was not expecting to carry. "You came," he said, "because of a call filed before either of us was born, addressed to a bureau that no longer exists, held in a relay buffer for 2 centuries behind fleet traffic that nobody cleared." He paused. "And you came." "The file was open," I said. "We don't close files remotely." He turned toward the window. Beyond it, the colony's main concourse ran straight toward the western ridge, empty, white in the noon sun, the shadows short and sharp. 2 centuries of daylight had smoothed every surface to the same pale finish, a world scrubbed clean of everyone who had lived in it. "The people who sent this call," he said quietly, "they evacuated within 60 hours. They survived. They resettled in the Kavath system. Their descendants are the ones who sent me here to assess whether this ground is worth reclaiming." He stopped. "They never canceled the call." "No. No one did." "No." The wind moved through the building, a low sound patient. It was Pren who broke it over the comm. "Commander, ground survey is flagging subsurface instability along the western ridge. Active seismic readings. The profile is consistent with the original evacuation data." I looked at Varan. "Your survey equipment, has it been logging seismic readings?" He pulled up 3 weeks of ground data on his field station. The pattern was there, layered under his habitability metrics, incrementally worsening microtremors, substrate fracture propagation, thermal gradient drift in the ridge face. He had been cataloging the readings as geological baseline for his assessment. He had not connected them to anything. "The original evacuation was triggered by this pattern," I said. "A geological confirmation survey was supposed to follow within 18 months. It was never conducted. Nobody went back to check." He looked at his own data, then at the distress burst still displayed on my portable, then out the window at the empty concourse, the pale buildings, the cracked ground that had been quietly failing beneath his feet for 3 weeks. "You answered a 2-century-old evacuation order," he said, "and the evacuation is still correct." We lifted him off Savith Reach 90 minutes later. His equipment, his data wafers, 3 weeks of survey records. Pren ran a full geological scan from orbit on the way out. The substrate fracture network beneath the western ridge had been propagating for 200 years, slow and patient, the way geology does its work, and was now within decades of a surface event that would have resolved the question of reclamation without anyone's input. The original colonial governor's seismic assessment had been right. The evacuation had been right. The distress call had been right. It just took 2 centuries to reach someone. I filed the resolution report that evening. Case reference, Priority 3, Historical Unresolved, Band Orvith Null 6. Origin, Colony Saveth Reach, Velhari Colonial Administration. Classification, Evacuation Class Seismic Distress. Filed 214 years, 6 months, 11 days prior. Received, current date. Elapsed, noted. Resolution, distress confirmed, colony correctly evacuated, current site occupants safely removed, geological survey completed, original prognosis validated. Frequency Orvith Null 6 retained on active monitoring per Article 7. Status closed. In the notes field, the one nobody reads on a Priority 3, I added a single line. Call was addressed to a bureau that no longer exists, filed by a governor dead for 170 years, held in a relay buffer for 2 centuries, and received by a species that was never the intended recipient. File closed. Nobody reads the notes field, but somebody ought to know it was open.